Our digital enemies are taking advantage of all of us. They are exploiting our open society to steal, to manipulate, to intimidate, to coerce, to disrupt, and to undermine. We are in a crisis mode. The Cat 5 hurricane has been forecast, and now we must prepare.
That, of course, was Homeland Security Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen warning the next big attack on the United States could come from computers, not airplanes. And we are already seeing it happen. The DHS says last year Russia attacked the U.S. energy grid in an operation so successful, hackers had the ability to cause widespread blackouts. So let's take a look at how it all unfolded. Officials say the hackers targeted the electrical grid and the nuclear power system, as well as critical commercial, water, aviation, and manufacturing facilities. They broke into the networks in two phases. First, they attacked smaller, trusted third-party businesses that had a relationship with the bigger intended targets. The hackers did this by sending fake emails that tricked users into giving up confidential information. They altered trusted energy websites to obtain usernames and passwords. They also sent malicious documents, which, when opened, gave hackers access to the victims' computers. That brings us to phase two. Are you scared yet? Attacking the primary targets. Using fake accounts set up already, the hackers sent malware to the new victims to gain remote access to their network. DHS says at that point, the hackers' objective was reconnaissance and information gathering about a plant's control systems. And the really scary part? In multiple instances, the hackers were able to access workstations and servers, but there was no indication that any sabotage existed. Recently, we learned that the hackers had the ability to cause the blackouts. One DHS official tells reporters, quote, they got to the point where they could have thrown switches and disrupted power flows. Joining me now, Axios deputy editor Dave Lawler, who wrote about the cybersecurity threat. Dave, this is a very scary story. If the hackers had access to throw the switch and sabotage our power plants, why didn't they?
Experts have told us to look at this almost like a nuclear deterrent. They kind of want us to know they have this capability, such that, when they intervene in our elections or they do things that we don't like, our capacity to respond to that is hampered by the fact that we know they have this capability to shut down, to cause blackouts in cities, to disrupt, as you said, critical infrastructure. I mean,
imagine if the power went out in the state of Maine in the month of January, all the lives that could be at risk. I know that you interviewed a few top intelligence officials and specifically asked which global threat worried them the most. What is keeping them up at night?
Right, so this is former CIA directors, directors of national intelligence, top White House advisors on national security. We asked all of them, what's the biggest threat? And more than half said a massive cyber attack. David Petraeus compared it to the weapon of mass destruction of cyber attacks, and he referenced this idea of tampering with the electric grid and causing prolonged blackouts that will put lives at risk. That was the number one thing. I think the second most raised issue was the rise of China, which is a huge kind of existential crisis for the U.S. So you put the fact that cyber attacks are above that on the threat scale, and you can tell it's a pretty serious problem.
So you say the rise of China. Talk about where the threats come from specifically, because people think, oh, it's just these hackers, we think they're Russians, but it's broader than that.
Right, and so there are four main cyber adversaries that we're dealing with. Russia is perhaps the most advanced, but China, North Korea, Iran, they're very involved in the cyber arena. And part of the problem here is we don't really have a doctrine for how to deal with this in the way we do in traditional warfare or even in responding to terrorist incidents. Cyber attacks happen. We don't always detect them right away. Some of them are just as damaging as more traditional attacks, and yet there's not really protocols there for they do X, we do Y.
Well, it's not strange that there aren't protocols. This is all sort of a whole new world that we're living in. But while you hear from these intelligence officials how worried they are about a cyber attack, we talk often about efforts to undermine our election system and the networks. What is the administration doing in terms of a coordinated front? Because the president still loves to say things like, well, could have been anybody, could have been a fat guy sitting on his bed somewhere.
Right. I don't think President Trump has been personally involved in these discussions, but there are discussions going on in the administration on two fronts. One is if Russia does press the button, if we do have blackouts that are caused by a foreign adversary, how do we coordinate with these private businesses? How do we get things back up and running? And how do we respond to it? Part two is these hacks that have already happened. If we pinpoint who did it, how do we punish those people and deter further incursions? Those discussions, as far as I can tell, have not reached any definitive conclusion.
I believe it was Vladimir Putin said, who controls artificial intelligence will control the world. And we know China is spending billions, if not trillions, on artificial intelligence. It's a topic we haven't heard much about from the president.
Hey, MSNBC fans, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down there and click on any of the videos here to watch the latest interviews and highlights. You can get more MSNBC for free every day with our newsletters. Just visit msnbc.com/newsletters to sign up now.